one of the bigger news stories since we last got together is the Florida High School Athletic Association Board of Directors unanimously voted yesterday to allow athletes to profit from their name, image, and likeness. I don't there Florida's not the first state to do it. Like, I think plenty of states have done it, but I think it's important, or at least it's notable, because if you look at the way high school recruiting has worked, for however many years, California, Florida, Texas, Georgia, and Louisiana, these are the hotbeds. And those are all states that had already been permitting NIL activities. Now Florida joins the group. But one of the things I see far as discussed about why they're doing this is like fear of athletes leaving the state and going to play elsewhere. Is that like a genuine fear? Because I don't know, Danny, you've got kids, bud. You've got two kids who are a little too young for high school sports at this point, but they might be playing one day. Would you seriously consider uprooting your family and moving across the country so your kid can make like 15 grand?
No, but if it was 5 milli, then I
But
could
for a
have a
high schooler?
conversation. Right. I mean, that's where, but I mean, Nico was 7 figures, right? In high
Mhm.
school that he had gotten that money up front. I think it's all relative too. I mean, I think there are some families that might be hurting that would do it for 100 or whatever the number is, and to secure their kid's future. So you take some of that risk off the table of injury, potentially. So yeah, I think it's relative. I just think this is the least surprising headline I've seen from our show, like maybe in the history of our show. And then whenever the next state is that approves it, because it's the landscape now. And if you're not allowing them to do it, you are playing with one hand tied behind your back. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah, totally. This impacts so few players in the state overall. I think it
Mhm.
just helps you avoid an unnecessary lawsuit. Uh, but the players that it impacts are the best players in the state, right? Most collectives, most schools don't have any interest in signing like juniors in high school or guys who are seniors in high school to NIL deals right then and there necessarily. Now, in some cases, they do, and those are generally the best cases. We saw, Jamie French, receiver out of Jacksonville yesterday, get a deal, I believe, with American Eagles. Like that was kind of cool. I guess I just broke the no free ads rule, but for most kids, this has no impact on your life. If you're a really, really good player in Florida, especially if your family was kind of hard up for money, it would totally make sense to move to a state where, I mean, it's a weird situation, but like if my 17-year-old son was making multiples of what I'm going to earn in my lifetime, then yeah, like that's the thing you can't pass up. So there's really, I don't think, any real downside to this.
Well, hold on. Can I
Not
ask
many
a
kids are going
question?
to get NIL in high school. Not many.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So this is NIL in the truest sense of the word. Is this not going to be used for recruiting when they are paid from the colleges while they're in high school and it's okay? That was
Danny.
my interpretation. Because like you, I don't think anybody, there might be a few kids that are paid 10 to 15 grand to switch high schools or come play for some academy that's a football powerhouse from one state to another. I was under the interpretation the biggest impact this would have is recruiting once again, and the players that are apt to be the top players in college will be able to be paid in high school to make those types of commitments.
Yes, totally. What I'm saying is like there's not a lot of places that want to commit NIL to high schoolers, but like well before their senior season,
Mhm.
Right.
So
Right.
it just the variance is quite large. Like, I would almost never give a high school junior NIL. Like it would have to be a pretty rare situation where the kid was just like a
Arch Manning.
Moses who went to Bama, like Bo Jackson, like certain guys you just know, like Amarius Mims, pretty obvious on that one. Uh, but like for the most part, these guys are still developing, and like your high school recruiting rankings are going to be wildly different as a senior as they were as a junior. So it doesn't impact most kids, but yeah, this does allow you to do. Well, first of all, you're never allowed to use NIL as a recruiting inducement, Danny. So all NIL
Right.
is, of course, good and true NIL according to the people who make the rules. But yeah, this opens you up for that too.
And
Well,
that was my thought too, and kind of question to you guys was when we go to the revenue share in 25, there's a lot of speculation about what's going to happen with collectives. These were very, they were put together last minute to try to pay the players. Now it happens when the money comes from the university. Don't you think this would be an opportunity for them to stay relevant and keep that funding going and saying, hey, we need to make sure our roster is there. Yes, we can pay them. And I'm sure there will be schools that will go above and beyond with collective money, but I think this is where it could be funneled to as well as to the high school level, because they won't, in my understanding, they won't get a piece of that revenue share.
Yeah. I think a lot of your more successful collectives will either sort of be like subsumed by the university or at least in some sort of, relationship, a more formalized relationship with the university. The schools that have good NIL setups, I don't think that they're going to want to try to reinvent the wheel. I mean, like if you think about like why would you, right? I mean, now I guess the counter is there are definitely going to be some associate athletic directors who really can't define their job title cleanly, who are probably going to be on the chopping block. If you listen to what Texas A&M AD Trev Albert said, he was like, we have a lot of in the whole like waste, fraud, and abuse model. So we'll see kind of how that goes. I could see in some situations some AD being reassigned to be like the head of NIL, whether or not he actually has the skill set for it.
Here's one thing, Anthony Guion brought this up too. One thing I'm wondering if this will impact, because I think of like, especially in Texas, where it's, we know how the high school football situation is there. And I also think of Chicago high school basketball, where for years kids have been transferring between like the schools, going to different places for better, situations. Will this create like a transfer portal kind of situation in high schools, whereas like some of the private schools can maybe afford to be like, hey, you know what? If you want to come here from your public school, we'll give you, obviously we'll pay for your tuition and we'll give you 10 grand or whatever. Could we see something like that developing because of this?
I mean, look, there's a lot of private schools that kind of find ways to help families out with housing.
This just kind of makes it above board.
Now, I think
Danny,
the thing.
Did you guys ever play like? I mean, you went private, right?
Yeah,
but like you guys weren't doing the housing thing, I assume.
No, we were single A, but we had some players on scholarship. They were getting free education. Then our school wasn't super cheap. What about? So do you think the next step in this that will follow this? Because I know the transfer rules. Because I was going to say the football crazy states with high school football. Clearly, this will go that direction. But I also know that the transfer rules in Florida are way different than Georgia, even though it's a step away. Like Georgia, Bud, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it incredibly hard to transfer in Georgia?
Yeah. So
like eligibility wise, like you have to sit out a year, I think. Like they're old school.
Really?
In Florida, you can play football in the fall and basketball for another school in the basketball season. Like it's nuts.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you can play like different schools in spring and fall in Florida. Like for sure.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Some states have it. I think it depends on kind of what your tax base is, like how much do you want to fund really investigating all this stuff. I mean, it's a big state. There's a lot of kids transferring, like appeals. Then all of a sudden you get legal bills with lawsuits. I hate it from like the hometown aspect of it. From like a taxpayer perspective, I'm like, please don't waste my tax dollars trying to like tell a kid he can't go to a certain high school over another high school. Like come on, like our education rankings are already kind of low enough here in Florida. So I think that's largely why they do it. Like it was a cost cutting measure in the state of Florida to not challenge and investigate every single transfer request. And then, I mean, a certain number of denials will end up as lawsuits.